So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Summer Concert Artistry for fall of 2023. Paula Kreider here, and I am so excited to welcome our first guest for the fall, and it's Chip DeStefano. He begins his 28th year of teaching, all at McCracken Middle School. And I should say that that's one of the greatest examples in the world. There are too many, I think, people who keep on wanting to change jobs till they find a good band. And Chip has done what all great teachers do. He built his band program. And his bands have performed at Illinois MEAs and the Super State contest, and twice earned the high honor of performing at the Midwest Clinic. And Chip is also a leader in his state. Rather than complain about that there was no all-state experience for middle schoolers, he brought together some like-minded people and has put together a really great experience for middle schoolers in the state of Illinois. I should also say that Chip is a master teacher. Several years ago, I had the privilege of using Chip's band as a lab band for a Midwest clinic, and not only were they well prepared, Chip taught his kids to love music, and it's apparent from day one that he is a master music educator. And which brings us to the purpose of this Summer Artistry series. In this brief segment, the goal is not to reinvent the wheel, but rather to, take one of the ideas that you hear Chip talking about and maybe involve it in your program. And that's what this is all about. We're all lifelong learners. So, Chip, welcome to the program. Thank you for the gift of your time. And my first question to you is simply this. You have one of the premier middle school bands in the country. So if I were a fly on the wall during the first weeks of your school year, what would I see and what would I hear in your rehearsals? How do you prepare for the beginning of each year?
Well, first of all, Paula, thanks for your really kind words. We've been fortunate. I think that rehearsal lab at Midwest was when we met. And we've been fortunate. I feel very fortunate to count you among one of my mentors, and that was such a wonderful experience for our kids, and really propelled it. We made Midwest that year with that session, and that session really propelled us into our application that following spring, and we were fortunate enough to be successful. But I guess to get to answer your question, especially early in the year, you'd see us really prioritizing the daily routine at the beginning of our rehearsals. Both in terms of how the kids are expected to behave and rehearse, but also especially in terms of what our performance priorities are for the school year. And even since my early years teaching, tone and pitch have been by far priority number one and priority number two. And I think a lot of that comes just from my schooling, my background of being at Northwestern, and having John Painter and Steve Peterson, Don Owens as my primary mentors, because that's what their focus was in their rehearsals, and that certainly rubbed off on me. But also because developing tone and developing pitch in the ensemble and in the individual students, those are really long-term goals. And so I have to make sure that we're spending a good portion of time every single day, really since they're beginners, working on those, because it takes years upon years of developing those skills. And so when I think about tone, I think about tone for the individual student. And what does that mean for them? It means they need really good embouchures. And so that's going all the way back to the very first moments of their beginning year. They need great air. They need quality equipment. And they need the oral concept of what the characteristic sound for their instrument is. If a student has those four things, they're going to make a pretty good sound. But you also have to kind of think about tone in terms of what does that mean for the ensemble, because it's more than just the individual combination of the individual student sounds. The ensemble tone also comprises the balance of the ensemble, the blend of the ensemble, the timbre of those sounds. And so that's what we spend a lot of time working on early in the year. So how do we do that? We do that by breathing every day. We do breathing exercises every day, very heavily influenced by the breathing gym stuff by Patrick Sheridan and Sam Palafian, doing exercises that they call them workout exercises, where you try to expand your usable lung capacity so you go to the point of uncomfortably full and uncomfortably empty. We try to do those every single day. And also flow exercises, where those exercises are taking the students from comfortably full to comfortably empty and practicing that turnaround of their breath. We do those exercises every single day as well. The other exercises that we make sure we do every single day, but spend more time on it at the beginning of the year for sure, is just the simple Concert F exercise. And a lot of what we do now is very, very influenced by you, Paula, by Richard Floyd, by Robert Herrings, for sure, Robert a lot, and Cindy Lansford. But we do some exercises that have kind of stolen from them a little bit and modified a little bit as well. So even just a simple Concert F and having the kids hold it for 8 counts and really focusing in on the attack, making sure it's together and with a quality articulation, the sustain, make sure it's good sounds, that the sounds are consistent from section to section and consistent from student to student. And then the release, making sure the release is together and we're entering silence the way we want to enter as well. And then we'll kind of expand that into the Remington exercise. Also in starting on Concert F and descending chromatics from there. And then continuing on, then we'll kind of go into chorales, which kind of leaves the kind of Texas model a little bit. There's not a lot, to my knowledge, a lot of my mentors don't do a lot of chorales down there. But I like the opportunity to take everything that we've worked on in long tones and apply it to really simple music that's actually music. So we spend a lot of time in chorales, really simple chorales. A lot of the published chorale books, I think they're just too hard for middle school kids, because I really want my students focusing just on tone and just on pitch and not worrying about their fingers, not worrying about key signatures they're not comfortable with, not worrying about rhythms that are different than what their neighbor is playing, and just really chorales where everybody has the same rhythm and it's very simple for them technically. So I'm thinking like hymnal chorales we'll have transposed, and then for that we'll just rotate through a different set of keys throughout the year. So much like a director who kind of intrinsically with technique, if they're doing a piece that's in D flat major, they'll beat that D flat major key into the kids. If we're doing a piece in D flat major and we're having problems with pitch, we'll bring out the D flat major chorale. Instead of doing Concert F, we'll work on Concert D flat. Instead of doing the Remington starting on F, we'll do the Remington starting on D flat. We'll do all those things to kind of get the kids to develop that sense of pitch and that new key as well. So I think you'll see a lot of that at the beginning of the year. And then we can talk about that if you want, or the rest of what you'll see in our routine rehearsals. We work on articulation almost every single day. That's very much a Robert Herrings influence for sure.
So tell me a little bit about that articulation exercise.
So the articulation exercise it's very similar. There's an articulation exercise in Foundations in Superior Performance, the Chose publication, and it's kind of modified from that. And you look at it and it doesn't look like much. I mean, it's a whole note followed by a whole rest, followed by 2 half notes, followed by a whole rest, and then 4 tenuto quarter notes. Which we call touching quarter notes, 4 touching quarter notes, and then 4 long lift, which are kind of a tenuto staccato quarter notes, and then 4 staccato quarter notes, which we call them lifted. Then whole rest, and then we do the same thing in eighth notes, touching eighth notes, rest for 4, lifted eighth notes, then we go to triplets. And then where it kind of deviates from that Foundations exercise, the 16th notes we break down. So we'll do 1 16th note every beat, da, 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 da. Then we'll go to 2 16th notes, da, 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 3 16th notes, and then 4 16th notes followed by a quarter note. We never do that full measure of 16th notes. You actually don't run into articulated 16th notes for a full measure much in middle school repertoire. But that exercise does not look like much, but boy, the amount you can teach with that exercise, just with articulation itself and getting the kids to listen and lock in and try to match. It's amazing what that accomplishes. And I hadn't really previously taught articulation as a separate skill. We would teach it through the repertoire per se. But I found that by really isolating it and getting the kids to think about it in that way, it becomes more automatic. And then once it applies to the repertoire, We just have to bring it back to that articulation, and it transfers really, really easily. And that's kind of my goal, especially with middle school kids. It's my goal, if it's a skill the kids need to have, it's way easier to teach it in isolation. Um, and so, depending on what that skill is, I'll find ways to break it down to the individual components. And then we'll work on those individual components away from the repertoire, so that the hope is then that it'll transfer to all the music that they play and not whatever that specific piece is.
Bravo. So you're a great trombonist. Do you model a lot for your kids?
I used to think I was pretty good. I don't call myself a great trombonist anymore, for sure. I do model a lot with our beginners, for sure, and our younger students a lot. But even with our older kids, I do model, especially at the beginning of the year. That old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's one thing for me to say it, but for me to say, no, just do it like this, more often than not, it helps, because they really do need to have that mental image of what they want to sound like. If they can't hear it in their head, they're not going to be able to play it on purpose. They might be able to do it by accident every once in a while, but we
Yeah.
want them to be intentional about what they do. And Not so much with our younger students, but with our most experienced students, we spend a lot of time working on that inner hearing skill. And if you think about what do kids need to be able to do to be able to hear something in their head, well, they need to have that sound concept. They need to have great oral skills. They need to be able to look at that music and be able to hear that pitch. So we work on singing with our brass kids. We work on them buzzing their mouthpiece to help them develop their ear. And really, they need to have some sort of intent behind what they're doing. They actually have to physically, not physically, but they actually have to, like, tell their brain, I want to sound like this. And then more often than not, their brain just kind of says, okay, and helps them play like that. And so that was something I had never really heard of until I got to Northwestern. And was just absolutely blown away by the fact that you could just imagine something and then you would just play it because you imagined it in that way. But it's equally as effective for middle school kids, maybe even more effective for middle school kids, as a way to get them to play more maturely, especially more musically and more maturely.
Indeed. So Chip, do you have a list of tone models for each instrument? How do you get the kids to develop that concept?
Should I have a list? Yes, I should. One of the things I make sure I do, and this sounds awful, is I make sure I don't demonstrate the instruments for them if I don't get a really good sound. So
Yeah.
I'll play trombone for them. I will play euphonium for them. I'll play tuba. I'll play percussion, and I'll do a little bit of flute. But that's about as much as I'll demonstrate, even to our beginners, because I want to make sure that everything that they hear is outstanding. So when I'm modeling for them and they're in clarinet class, I'll model on trombone. And we'll talk about what they need to do physically and inside their mouth in order to match what I'm doing on trombone, which of course isn't the same. But still using my trombone playing as a model for what they need to do on their specific instrument. So we will hop on YouTube every once in a while and do some listening and do some recording. I mostly, if I'm being honest, use student models. If I have a student who plays with a really beautiful sound, I will use them as demonstrations. We have it's kind of an unofficial official mentor program where our older students will work with our fifth graders, and we use them for models for sure. So we'll have seventh and eighth graders come in and play for our fifth grade band once a week. And if they're working on a solo, if they're working on an honor band audition, they'll just play some of that. It's good experience for them to play and perform while they're nervous. But more importantly, for us, it provides, I think, a high quality model for our younger students of what we hope that they'll sound like, and hopefully what it also does is provides them a vision. Those fifth graders provides them a vision of them playing in the future. And then they can start to imagine themselves being in seventh and eighth grade and coming to play for the fifth graders when they're older.
Right. And there's that leadership that works so well for the kids who are modeling, as well as the kids who want to look up to those. That answers one of my questions, as why your kids are so enthusiastic about music. I mean, that's, I can walk into a band rehearsal and I'll know immediately whether it's going to be a great rehearsal, a good rehearsal, or I'm looking at my watch. And a lot of that has to do with the sounds that they're allowed to make before they come into the rehearsal. And that's what I noticed about your kids. I mean, everything you do has a thought process and a purpose behind it. But, the kids also had that look in their eye, was like, oh, what do we get to do today? Not what do we have to do today? How do you do that?
Well, I think there's a couple things, but the most important thing is that it's a reflection of me. I really believe that students are a reflection of their teacher. Um, I I love this. I mean, I have loved it. I have loved it since I was in sixth grade in a band room in Killeen, Texas, at Nolan Middle School with Patrick Nault as my band director. I love this, and I think it reflects onto the kids, and I think they know I love it. I think they know I work really, really hard for them, and I think they know I care about them. So I think those things certainly fall into place. Um, I also take it really seriously, and I want to be good. I want the band to be good. I want the kids to achieve what they're able to achieve the best, and so everybody has to be their own personality. I could not go into a room and do what you do, Paula. I could not. I couldn't go in and do what I couldn't do what Robert Herrings does. I just couldn't. It's not my personality.
Right.
But I can be my best me and still love it and care about the kids and maybe be a little more serious. Maybe not joke with the kids as
Mhm.
much as some other teachers will do, but they know I care, and they know what we're all aiming for. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all on the same page.
And I
I hope
think
that
that's
answers your
really
question.
good.
I don't know if I can put a firm finger on it, but I think
Well,
it's that. And I think it's the culture of our ensemble for sure.
you ticked all the boxes there, because the person on the podium makes all the difference in the world. And your enthusiasm for what you do comes through loud and clear. And I think that's what we're all about, right? So next question, and if time permits, and you've been so succinct, this we're way ahead of schedule. Thank you, Joe. Um, there are a lot of young band directors who watch this, and they're just hungry for ideas. If you could give advice to your younger self, would there be anything that you might change, or uh, anything that you can give advice to younger student would be band directors?
Well, I think maybe one of the I don't know what I would change. I'd have to think about that a little bit. But one of the piece of advice that I got while a student at Northwestern that really resonated with and stuck with me is that for younger teachers, it's not that they hit fewer bullseyes. It's just kind of a dart analogy. It's not that younger teachers hit fewer bullseyes. They just have to they just have to throw more darts, and they're going to hit more walls than experienced teachers, where an experienced teacher will just have to throw fewer darts to hit those bullseyes. And so that really, for some reason, that really resonated with me. And when I started teaching, I actually literally thought to myself, nobody is going to outwork me. Now that might be something I would now that might be something that I would change. Looking back, maybe that wasn't the best approach. Um, but at least for us in this situation, it was really, really successful in
Mhm.
terms of I hate to say it, almost being able to will the program into excellence, being able to make it happen just through my sheer force of will. Um, and I think one of the things I've done a lot in the last maybe 16 years since then is try to be much more systematic about that and
Mm.
much more thoughtful and sequential in terms of how I teach. So it doesn't feel like I'm beating on the kids to teach them technique. Is I've
Sure.
taught them the skills that they've needed to learn in order to be able to play the technique. Um, and it's just more enjoyable, and it's more enjoyable for the kids for sure. It's more enjoyable for me.
Mhm.
um so I think that's maybe in a roundabout way kind of the way I think about my early years. I worked really, really hard. It was essentially the same size program with just me running it. I mean, our school a little bit. We're a really small school, about 100 kids per grade. Yeah, I was the only band director, doing everything, with 200 kids. And we made Midwest with the program structured that way, and that invitation really changed this program. We had a new
Mm,
room built for us. I was able to get help. We now have two full-time band directors here, which only means more opportunities for kids. Um,
absolutely.
that Midwest performance and the exposure that we got from that really really helped elevate this program in terms of, I mean, we've always had great community support. We've always had great administrative support, but it just kind of elevated that. And it was kind of like, this is the result of all that support. Um, and so I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit, but that's kind of how I think of that. I can't believe what we used to do. The room, yeah, you never saw our old room. It was super tiny. It was
Mm,
super tiny with like 10-foot ceilings, low ceilings. We had to tear the room down and set it up every single day for rehearsal because it was also a classroom during the day. So,
wow.
I part of me thinks that if it can get done at McCracken, it can get done anywhere. Um, but but it was through a lot of hard work for sure too.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? You take what you have and you do your absolute best. And some people think that, I mean, I've been in rehearsal halls that had $1 million band halls, and yet the band didn't sound like $1 million because the person on the podium didn't have that same level of expectation. Do you use any type of method book or something with your top group when you're in your preparation period?
So with our top group, I have a book that I co-wrote with Timothy Loest called Chorales and Beyond. That's the primary chorale book that we use with our students.
Mhm.
It took me actually it took it I used it for 10 years before it was published.
Mhm.
Tim and I worked on it for 5 years before it got published. We're really, really proud of it. But that's mostly like chorales and stuff. Everything else is just kind of like just single sheet things that I
Yeah,
make up for the kids and develop for the kids myself. I do a lot of writing of materials for myself, even for the beginners. I mean, we have a method book that we use, but a great deal of what we give them is just materials that we've developed ourselves.
that's fantastic. And as you said, you're going to come up with something that works for whatever they lack or whatever they need. Who publishes your book?
FJH publishes our book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It will get, and what they need is going to differ from year to year.
right.
With, talking of going back to the clarinet class or maybe the flute class, there's some years that defingering to C takes weeks, for
Mm,
them to get real comfortable with. And there's some years they do it on the first day. And so there's some years I need a sheet that works on that specifically, and then
right.
there's some years that we don't. So I never really kind of use a one size fits all, even with our own kids from year to year. I have a baseline thing, and then I kind of see what they need and go from there.
Well, and you're flexible, and it's obvious you have a plan and a method. And Chip, no surprise that your band sounds as it does, because you are a master teacher, and that's very, very much appreciated. Do you have any last words of advice for music educators before we put this to a halt here?
Sure. I think one of the things I probably should have recommended is about finding a mentor. And I think kind of going back to what would I change, I actually don't know if I'd change much. And I think some of it was because I did things the right way, even if it was by accident. But also my mistakes were pretty vital to my own learning and my own development of my teaching. But for me, besides my college professors being really strong mentors my whole career, I don't know if you know Doug Akey personally, but
Of
Doug
course,
Doug
yeah.
Doug is just the consummate musician, a wonderful, wonderful middle school band director who taught middle school his entire career. And he was college roommates with Steve Peterson, who is one of my
Wow.
primary mentors at Northwestern. And so Steve was so kind to put me in touch with Doug before I even started the job here. And Doug, I cannot say enough about how influential Doug was in my first few years teaching, and how kind he was to. I mean, it's not pre-email, but it was kind of pre-using email for everything, where,
Right.
I would call Doug almost once a week, and there was no real reason for Doug to pick up the phone and answer my endless amount of questions, but he always picked up the phone and he always answered my questions. And I tried not to make a single decision without running it by Doug. If at the end of the year, the administration, this won't sound too unfamiliar to people, but the budget here when I started was zero, like literally zero. So
Mm.
one of the first things I had to do was advocate. And at the end of that first year, the administration said, "Hey, we have some money left over in this line. We can use it to purchase new instruments. What do you think?" I called Doug and I said, "Hey, Doug, I have this much money. This is what we have. What should we do?" And Doug said, "I'd buy this, this, and this." And so I went to the administration. I said, "We need to buy this, this, and this." And some of it was just blindly following it because it was him saying we should do
Mhm.
it. But other parts of it was just also just trusting his expertise. And if he said I needed to do this, then I needed to do that.
Well, and
And
there's
that
another
can be
lesson.
hard for young that can be really hard for young teachers. I
Mhm.
know you mentor a lot of directors too. um and you know how sometimes you'll make a suggestion and they won't do it.
Right?
And
I was
I'm
just
telling
thinking
you, Paula, if you said, Chip, you need to do this, I guarantee you, even if I didn't agree with you, I would do it.
that.
I
Oh,
would, I
very
would,
fine.
there are people. I mean, if you choose to have somebody as your mentor, when they make a suggestion, you need to do it. And then, you know, if you don't like it 3 or 4 months after that, fine.
Right.
Make it, but you have to at least give it a chance, because they know what they're talking about.
Well, and that's another thing. And I think a lot of young teachers are afraid to ask questions because they think that's a sign of weakness. And to my way of thinking, asking questions is a sign of strength, you know.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you for setting that great example. Well, we're just about out of time, Chip, but again, I wish you a great year. And I thank you so much for sharing your ideas with us. And I'm sure you'll probably get some emails once we start this saying, what was that book again, or
Oh,
whatever.
absolutely. And anybody can feel our website is mccrackenband.com.
Ah, great.
You be absolutely just reach out. I'm happy to answer questions. And really what I'm happy to do is pay forward. The number of people who have been so kind to me, and helpful to me over my career. I just kind of feel like I'm paying it forward. I'm happy to answer and help, um, as much as I can. And I'm so excited that you're conducting the All Illinois Junior Band, that middle school
I'm so excited
state
that
honor
you
band
helped me.
experience.
I'm so excited that you helped me pick literature because that was way, I mean, off my radar. But I'm excited too because I'm excited about the pieces, and I know the kids are going to be play very well.
It's a great program. It's going to be fun. Albanian dance. That's the only one I'm a little. I actually have done that here at McCracken.
Yeah,
Actually, we played it at Midwest in 2006.
right. That's the first time
And
I heard it.
it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But it's also in D flat, and it'll be great. And the kids will do a wonderful job on it for
Well,
sure.
if you can have that D flat chorale ready for me, Chip. Hey, well, listen, again, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I wish you all good things and much joyful music making this year.
Oh, thanks, Paula. You too.
You bet. Bye bye.
Bye.